friends, Lorelei Black here from Blade Broom, and this week we're going to be talking about Imbolc traditions that you can use in your upcoming Imbolc celebrations if you don't already have something planned, or these might add to the celebrations that you do have planned. Before we get started, I just had the quick announcement that I am launching a Patreon page due to the request of several viewers and readers of mine that have been asking for that kind of way to interact and to help support the work that I'm doing in creating witchy content. So thank you guys for giving me that nudge, and it's up. So I just launched it like now, so it's there, and you can find that at patreon.com/bladeandbroom. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the timing of Imbolc as a holiday. And this particular Sabbat celebration is positioned right between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Now, a lot of folks tend to use a hard calendar date like February 1st or February 2nd for their celebration of Imbolc. But some folks actually use an astrological date for this because the solstices and equinoxes are, after all, astrological events. And so it is also a traditional thing to use astrological timing for it. If you're interested in doing that, you'd be looking for 15 degrees Aquarius as your date. And again, that's going to be a movable date, just like the solstices and the equinoxes don't fall on exactly the same day each year after year. They're kind of in a range. So you're going to find them, somewhere between, usually between the 20th and like 23rd of the months in which they fall. So it's going to be the same with the other 4 Sabbats if you want to honor those in astrological terms and get that sort of precision with those holidays. You're going to find those on the 15th degree of the solar sign in which they would fall. So in the northern hemisphere, that's 15 degrees Aquarius. And again, I tend to default to northern hemisphere since that's where I live. And again, I practice a very grounded and rooted in place sort of practice. I encourage you to do the same. So if you're practicing in the southern hemisphere, obviously this is not Imbolc for you right now when I'm recording and releasing this video. Right now, it's going to be Lammas. So, and these are very mated and twinned holidays. They're not exactly the same, but they very much go together, which is something worth exploring, is the way that the holidays don't just pair off and represent opposites of each other, but how they have some overlap with each other, with their opposite counterpart on the other side of the year wheel. So I think this year, 2021, the sun is 15 degrees Aquarius on February 3rd or 4th. I would have to double check those dates, which I will do and post in the description box below so that you'll have that information if you're interested in celebrating on that date. So Imbolc is very much a Northern European tradition in terms of its origins. We don't necessarily see things that look like this holiday or very similar to this holiday coming out of other parts of the world. This is definitely something that came out of Germanic and Celtic practice. Imbolc itself as a word comes from oimelc. I might be butchering the pronunciation of that, but that's how I understand the word to be pronounced. And it is referencing actually the ewes coming into their milk at this time of year. So if you're doing a lot of animal husbandry and you're keeping a lot of sheep, the ewes are starting to have their milk drop because they're getting ready to bear lambs in just a short period of time. And of course, then we see all the little frolicking lambs at spring equinox, which is one of the reasons why they're such a popular symbol. One of the many reasons why they're such a popular symbol around that same time. And of course, that milk coming in for the ewes then provides sustenance for the people as well, who are still very much in the thick of winter, especially if you think about what the weather cycles would have been like and are still like to some extent in Northern European climates. Now, of course, we're experiencing a lot of climate change, so things are different now than they used to be. Even 10, 20 years ago, I was performing Imbolc rituals where the theme of fire and ice, which is one of the popular themes of Imbolc, was very prominent, and and it was not hard to get into the mindset of, ancestors waiting for that fire to return, looking for glimpses of it in the sky, and seeing that, yes, we're having some lengthening to our days now. Hooray! That fire is coming back celestially, but it's also, the promise of it is there beneath the ground. Seeds are starting to wake up, and here in a few weeks, we'll start to see the very first sprouting of things. Sap will start rushing back into the green world around us, and you'll start to see reddening on certain kinds of trees and branches, and you'll see leafing out right around the time of the spring equinox. But all of that bursting forth of life that happens at the spring equinox, there's the promise of that right now at Imbolc. We know that it's happening, and it's very much that symbol of the very pregnant mother about to give birth, which is something that's then sort of encapsulated in the image of the pregnant sheep, the pregnant ewe. Bridget was very much associated with that pregnant ewe and with midwifery in general. And so that's one of the reasons why she's so heavily associated with this holiday, and so heavily associated, in fact, that her name actually transplants the name Imbolc for some traditions. They'll just call it Bridget as a holiday, or Breed as a holiday, or Bridget's Day, Breed's Day, Bride's Day. You'll see a lot of these other terms associated with this particular holiday for some traditions, because they're like, forget all the other stuff. We're just honoring her and everything that she incorporates and encapsulates and represents, which, by the way, is a lot. She's a threefold goddess, although just limiting her to 3 faces is probably not enough. She's one of the most beloved goddesses worldwide. Some people mistakenly want to call her a maiden mother crone goddess, but that's probably not accurate. We really don't see crone type faces of Bridget. We do see some maiden-like faces if we want to ascribe these sort of roles that are associated to the procreative state of a woman's life cycle, which is perhaps no longer a timely thing to do. And really, I think Bridget sort of embodies the fact that that might not have even been entirely fair in her time. And Bridget is one of those goddesses that is seen as having lived a life on earth. There is, you see that a lot actually with Celtic deities, where there's this idea that no, this goddess walked among us and lived a mortal life, but they also have passed into legend and then passed into myth and passed into godhood because they were so grand and embodied so much of divinity. Bridget's faces really have a lot more to do with her skills than with her reproduction, which I love about her, frankly. I think that that's a lot of how we should be looking at goddesses. We very rarely talk about male deity figures in terms of their reproductive cycles. We don't limit them by that and go, oh, well, he's young, so he's not having kids yet, and now he's a virile man, so this is all about having children, and now he's progressed into a certain level of sagacity, so he must no longer be sexually potent. We don't put men in that category, so we don't put male deities in that category, and it's not really fair to women to do that either, because women's sexual being doesn't stop at menopause, and it doesn't start the moment that they have gotten pregnant and give birth either. But I digress, like I do. So Bridget's three faces are all very much about, again, about her skills, and it's she's typically seen as a poet, as a midwife, and as a blacksmith. And these are the three things that we most frequently associate with Bridget. She's also got this very much dual nature, where she is a fire goddess, and that blacksmithing is sort of this alchemical fire that she wields, right? And we see that with a lot of the blacksmithing deities, although Bridget is very notable for being a blacksmithing goddess, you know, a smithing goddess. We see very few examples of those. There are a lot more smithing gods. But then she's also got this poetry, which is described as the fire in the head. And then with midwifery, helping to birth, there's this concept of both fire and water embedded there. So it's the fire in the belly, but it's also, which is that spark of life, but there's also this healing water association, and Bridget is innumerably associated with wells and sacred springs, and healing water in general throughout her places of worship and honor. And then, of course, in places where it's very, very cold, it makes sense to honor and work with and make magical use of water in its crystalline form, whether that's snow or ice. And certainly there's a lot of potent magical work that can be done with both. And we see lots of uses in that if we look to Norse magic, and there is some within Celtic magic as well, because snow and ice were very much realities that were to be contended with. Now, the United States is such a big country. It is such a big place. And of course, I know that I've got viewers that are not just in the United States, but we're dealing with vastly different climates. I mean, I used to live, so it is not a secret that I live in Louisville, Kentucky. 5 years ago, I lived in Indianapolis, which is just 2 hours north of Louisville, and just the difference between those two cities, the weather is entirely different. They're getting snow this winter, have gotten snow. You know, I've seen lovely, lovely posts of snowy, blizzard-like pictures from my friends in Indianapolis, and here in Louisville, you know, we get all excited and forget how to drive when there's an inch of snow that's falling. And the supermarkets run out of all of the French toast supplies as well. You know, bread and eggs and milk, which actually are kind of all the Bridget supplies too, right? So, interesting thought. Hi friends, I just wanted to take a hot second to say that I am really glad you're here and watching, whether you have just found the channel or you've been watching since the beginning. Thank you so much. And I also wanted to let you know that if you are enjoying this fantastic witchy content, to do that YouTube thing where you subscribe and click the bell. I'm really disoriented, so I don't know which side it's on, but wherever it is, click it. So that you don't miss any of the upcoming content. And also to interact with me and let me know what kind of stuff you'd like to see. I have lots of ideas and I will ramble on about the things that I'm really interested in, but I would also like to know what kind of stuff you'd like to see coming out. Also, I do a ton of witchy things outside of YouTube. Books, events, printable grimoire pages, writing. online classes coming soon, including the Red Thread Academy of Witchcraft, which is going to be a way to study with me and with my witchcraft tradition, no matter where you live. So if you're interested in checking those things out, my link tree is down in the description box below, and it is a way for you to hook up and connect with me through all the things. All right, back to content, Lorelei. Bye. So while a lot of traditional witches and traditions in general work with Bridget at this time of year, not everybody does. And it's worth noting some other ways to work with this particular holiday and things to do on this particular holiday or on this Sabbat. So the Cailleach is another really important goddess figure at this time of year. She is a Scottish goddess, which is a little difficult to say. Scottish goddess, Scott. So the Cailleach is very much associated with winter. And in fact, she's sort of seen as a winter queen. And she has a lot in common with Frau Hulda from Germanic tradition. And I would encourage you to sort of look at the similarities between the two, actually. So one of the ways that she's said to be associated with winter is that she's actually the one who ushers in winter by going and washing her great woolen plaid off the coast in the Gulf of Scotland. And when she's done washing it, that great plaid is as white as the snow. And then winter fully sets in, and snow covers the land and blankets the land. And I would like to point out here, just really quickly, that the Cailleach then has this woolen plaid that is this mantle, this veil, if you will, and I understand that a plaid can be used in many, many ways, and that veil is certainly not the only way. But Bridget is also associated with a mantle or a cloak, a covering, a veil. And Cailleach's name actually is related to a Proto-Indo-European word that means veiled one. And so there is a tradition, a very much early European tribal tradition of veiled goddesses being honored at this time of year. And throughout the winter, really, like not just this time of year, but throughout the winter time, them really having sway at this time of year. And so at Imbolc, she goes out to gather firewood for the rest of her winter. And if she wants it to be a longer winter, because she's very much sort of in charge or in touch with winter storms in general, and weather magic, she will make it a nice, bright, sunny day so that she can gather plenty of firewood to stay inside. So I think you can see here really easily the association between the Cailleach and modern Groundhog Day. That if that fuzzy ground squirrel in Punxsutawney, that if he sees his shadow, meaning that it's a nice bright day, that winter will actually last longer instead of being shorter. So it's not only goddesses that get worked with at this time of year. In fact, there are a couple of notable ways in which the gods are honored in certain traditions. So some traditional witches really work heavily with the John Barleycorn cycle of myths, in which the grain is embodied or personified as John Barleycorn himself. And there is actually a folk ballad, which I will link a version of, but you can certainly find lots and lots of versions of this song on YouTube and all around. And we see him being planted, growing into youth and adulthood, and then being cut down, and then being replanted again. And the idea of the uses of the grain and the way he lives on in that way, and also the way the grain is cut and regrows, and cut and regrows. At this time of year, John Barleycorn is in the womb waiting to be reborn, is how that plays out in the cycle. And so this would be a time when a lot of folks honor that by drinking the last mug of beer or opening the last keg of beer that has been stored over the winter, and eating the last loaf of bread from last year. So this is another way that bread really plays into the cycle and celebration for Imbolc. And if you're seeing people referencing bread at Imbolc and you're thinking, isn't that a Lammas or a Lughnasadh thing? It is, certainly it is. But this is where you sort of see the seed of that counterpart in the other end of the year wheel here in this end of the year wheel. So really the last type of tradition that I want to talk about associated with this particular holiday here at the beginning of February, or about to be at the beginning of February, is Candlemas, which doesn't necessarily have to have anything at all to do with any of the goddesses or gods that I've just mentioned, or about their particular cycles, but you will see a holdover from a lot of Bridget's aspects, in the sense that it is very much related to fire, and the returning of fire, and the growing of fire, and the return of the light in the sky. So, and how that relates as above, so below, right? So the light's returning in the sky during the day. The celestial lamp is being rekindled. This is a good time to rekindle our lamps here on Earth. And so, and a lot of times candles are referred to as lamps, especially magical candles. They're often referred to as lamps of art. And that type of thing. So you'll see a lot of covens blessing, for instance, all of their candles for that year. This was actually a ritual that was very much part and parcel of the Christian church as well. So you'd see the church candles getting blessed at this time of year. But it's a super pagan concept, really, especially in the timing of it and aligning it to right now. So some people do pair up Bridget working and Bridget celebration with the Candlemas aspects and have her imbue and bless those candles. And some people aren't blessing the candles as much as they are making the candles. So I've seen that happen as well, where people will either do their dipping or their pouring or their rolling of candles, depending on however it is that they want to form candles, if they're going through that step of actually crafting candles for their coven. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed that background on some of the information behind some of the more common and some of the few less common Imbolc traditions and their practices. Drop comments down below and let me know what you think. You know I love interacting with you, and I will see you here next Monday at noon. Bye, friends.